Hi, Ashley. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Oh, cold but good.
Yes, I'm very cold. I think we can get started.
Sorry.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Committee Chair Ashley Esposito. I would like to welcome you all to the January 21st, 2025 meeting for the Policy Committee. If you haven't done so, please mute your phones. And anyone who does not mute their phones will be muted by the call moderator or removed from this call. Additionally, if you are not a board member, the CEO or her staff, please turn off your video. I will now do a roll call of the board to identify who is on the call. And please state your name before you introduce yourself, just so that we have you speaking on the record. Commissioner Ames Messenger.
Ames Messenger present.
Welcome. Commissioner Redding Lallinger. I think that he's going to be late. Commissioner Brooks. Commissioner Sally.
Commissioner Sally present.
Welcome. And members of the public that would like to provide public comment, you can do so by signing up at 9 a.m. on Thursday and up until 5 p.m. on Monday, the day before the meeting. And we'll go over that at the end. So I would like to have our first presentation of KIB-RA Sexual Offender Registry Changes to the Regulations to Address State Law HB 814 Juvenile Law Reform. Do we have someone here to present?
Sorry, Commissioner Esposito. So this is a regulation change, which ordinarily we just provide a submission, and so it's like a compliance report if there are questions. If you'd like just a brief summary, I think that Ms. Parson from the school's office is here and happy to provide that, and I can chime in if needed.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Can you give a quick summary?
Hello. Sorry, guys. So okay, we're pulling it up. Thank you to whoever is sharing their screen. So basically, I'll be going over the key summary revisions for policy KIB, which relates to individuals on the sex offender registry. So the main purpose for the revision was because there was a change in the Maryland state law. It was House Bill 814, which is the juvenile reform bill. And basically, it establishes restrictions for juvenile sex offenders, which stops them from knowingly entering school property and participating in school events. So the new section that we added was Section J, which is the application to juvenile registrants. So the new additions specifically state that there are provisions for registrants and sex offenders who also apply to the juvenile registrants, and it also references the sex offender registry to include the word juvenile inside of the document. So basically, this is in alignment with JKA, which is our visitor our visitor policy, which is due. We just got off of a call for that one. So we're also reviewing that and updating that, which will be applicable within our next school year. We're going to do the work over the summer for that. It wasn't like a big high level change that we made, but I'm happy to open it up to any questions that may have been lingering prior to me giving that brief summary.
I had a quick question. So does this mean that it will apply to students that are enrolled?
Sorry, I'm happy to jump in. So previously the legislature had passed a law saying that students who are on the sex offender registry could not attend school in person, and they actually had 3 options that the school could consider. One would be home and hospital if they qualified. The second would be virtual learning. And then the third option would be moving them to an alternative program. And so that change went into effect about 2 years ago when we revised KIB to match those requirements of the law. This revision is because the legislature realized they weren't clear and that they did not include juvenile registrants in the previous law. So it was only applying to youth and students who were on the adult sexual offender registry prior to this change. So the goal of this revision was to make it clear that if a student is on the juvenile registry, they are not allowed on school grounds. So it absolutely applies to students. The entire law is to prohibit students on the registry from being in person on school grounds.
And do you have a rough idea of the number of students that would, I guess, in the last academic year or what we're anticipating for this year? Like how many students we're talking about?
So I will be fully transparent. So the juvenile registry is not public. And so it is very difficult for us to know if a young person is on the juvenile registry unless we are being told that information proactively from the state's attorney's office. Their public defender typically will not share that information with us. So I think we're talking about maybe 1, maybe 2 students a year that I'm aware of, but this is a very small number of young people that would fall under this law.
Ash, I have one more question, but I don't want to steamroll everybody else. Is that okay? Esposito. Okay. So, and this begins to be slightly broader. I know that there are a number of bills that are coming through the legislature currently that would impact other students with legal involvement. I guess some of this, like as a district, are we concerned? I mean, certainly want to prioritize the safety of all students. We also want to look at some point, how do we create, what are the concerns here in terms of burden on the district? Like at what point are we making sure that we're able to safely control information that we only know at some point what we're told? And then secondarily, that we're kind of what are the measures to be sure that all students, so you mentioned that there are 3. So one of those is home and hospital. In terms of like, if we're working at virtual programs, like how does that, would they have access to our typical virtual programs? Do we need to have, like, would we be paying for a private provider of a virtual program? Kind of what are the options available to the district? And then kind of moving forward into this legislative session, are there other things that we should be concerned about that would have similar implications, especially once we go beyond the realm of just sexual violence or kind of sexual registry into kind of broader juvenile offenders more broadly?
I can chime in.
Outside the scope of here and a conversation for later, that's totally fine.
Exactly. And I apologize for the record. I'm Josh Sivan, Chief Legal Officer, Cora Parsons, Special Assistant to the school, to the Chief of Schools, and Rebecca Burney, Special Advisor in the legal office, just so we're all on the record. So we're monitoring closely that legislation, and there have been some updates both from the state board and from the legislature that we've closely tracked. We've worked closely in the legal office with the school's office. That's why you see all of us here, to make sure that we're appropriately responding to the laws, which really are ensuring that there's coordination and collaboration between the juvenile justice system and the school system. respecting and balancing each student's individual right to a public education with safety more broadly, and making sure we follow those and have an individualized determination for each student. We are working for that. We're also juggling and engaging and making sure we collaborate with the Re-Engagement Center, for instance, which is really important in our engagement with the Juvenile Justice Center. So that's the broader piece, and we'll continue to monitor.
Sorry, can I just chime in and add one quick thing? So actually next month, I believe you will see proposed revisions to JKA, which does include some information about our reportable offense protocols, which Commissioner sort of gets to the question you were asking. So I will say that, you know, the youth on the juvenile registry is a particular carve out for certain students that are not prohibited on school grounds, but for other students that are not on the registry and have been found arrested or found responsible for a whole host of other offenses, we would use our reportable offenses protocols, which Josh was detailing and which we're following very closely, some of the changes that the legislature is trying to make. But you'll get more information about that next month when we talk about reportable offenses.
Any other questions? Thank you. And up next, we have a presentation for JJIC, or an update from JJIC academic eligibility for interscholastic and intrascholastic athletics.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Bird, and I'm the Director of Athletics, and I will be presenting on proposed revisions to our academic eligibility policy for athletics.
I believe
Mr. Chair.
Jonathan was going to share, but I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much. So it is my pleasure to provide this information today for the Policy Committee. Our JJIC policy does align with priorities 4 through 7. It is also a connection to the Blueprint for Success as a part of our wholeness initiatives. We understand athletics definitely is something that connects to health and wellness. We also identify it as an opportunity to support students physically and mentally when they're connected to caring adults. We know that enhance the school experience, and it's also education-based athletics is also a part of the curriculum. It's an extension of the school day using athletic opportunities. As we discuss this policy, it is important to understand what our regulatory requirements are. COMAR, which is our state requirement from our state governing body of athletics, requires that all students make satisfactory progress towards graduation. As you see in the language here, they allow each local school system to establish standards for their jurisdiction. I want to tell you a little bit about this world of athletics, a little bit about our story before we dive into the policy work. So as you can see here, we have definitely worked to re-engage students following COVID. We did see our numbers decline a little bit, but we're happy to report that last school year, these are duplicated numbers, but we had over 6,100 students participating, and we are super excited to know that we are actually students in this process. You see our high school offerings being displayed here. Where you see asterisks, you will notice that those are not offered as a district league because we have not identified enough schools that have demonstrated interest. But if a school has expressed interest, we have provided support so that they can offer those teams. Winter, spring is our offerings because we do operate seasonally. Very excited to talk about our work in middle school. We have expanded, and hopefully you've heard about the number of things that we've offered to middle school students. We understand the importance of capturing them early, but the real thing for us is, of course, equity access. And our goal in engaging them earlier is to develop a pipeline so they will be looking forward to and prepared to participate in these opportunities when they reach high school. We have 7 district coordinated programs, and we've also worked very hard to identify vendors to provide support so there can be more robust programming. So we have a weight that the district providing these sports that are listed here, but we've also exposed our students to some unique and exciting opportunities through partners like Squash Rise and rowing experiences through First Tee Golf. And you'll see last year we had an opportunity to support over 2,400 students, and that was about 81% of the middle schools participated in either our district coordinating programming or the vendor programming provided. The facts, Under Armour is a huge partner, and so hopefully everybody is aware of the support. But it's greater than uniforms. And definitely that has been one of the key things that they've always shared with us. The uniforms are easy. They consider that low-hanging fruit, but they want to make greater engagement, and they've done that in a number of ways. One of those supports is the Student Athlete Leadership Council. So we have representatives from our high schools that participate in leadership activities. And they also, at the end of the year, ask us to provide data. And so here you will see that our athletes have had an opportunity to have higher GPAs, greater attendance, and the reports were not available for last year, but in previous years, and we were on track, we believe this year also.
I lost audio. Did anybody else?
I did as well. And
It looks like she's frozen. Let me see if
Okay.
I can get her on a call.
I'm contacting her now.
Chalk it up to the weather. It's protesting. It's too cold out there.
If you can give us about 60 seconds, she's going to come on to my computer. If you can give us just 60 seconds. Because no one can
Thank you.
present this information as wonderfully as she
Yes.
can.
I'm sorry, I'm
What
not
is-
able to jump in and present for the rest of it for Director Bird here.
Just add my commentary that I really appreciate, just early commentary that like we were able at the Student Youth Forum to talk to students about academic eligibility and just the kind of feedback that we heard, just kind of being flies on the wall as it was their forum. But I really appreciate the work that you guys have done to lift that up for ASCBC and other folks across the district, our young people. So thank you.
I second that. Yes.
Okay, I'm back with the help of Ms. Goodwin. I'm actually in the building, so I don't know exactly what happened. That was strange, but okay, thank you, Ms. Bernie. I was like, this slide is stuck. No, wait a minute, I'm stuck. So here I am. Ms. Bernie, I'm ready for the next slide. Okay, thank you. So this is an opportunity to discuss our policy currently, and then talk about what these proposed revisions are for your feedback and input. So just as we are talking about the purpose of this, why are we reviewing them? Why are we looking at them? We understand that we need to have a balance between athletics and academics. These are opportunities that are very important to students, but they do have an accountability in participating in those. And so we want to make sure that we design a policy that can support both. Our goals in reviewing this policy, we're looking at some demographic data we want to talk about and identify if there are any disparities in eligibility outcomes when we're examining our current policy. We also want to take an opportunity to make sure that we're promoting the overall well-being of student athletes. We understood what it was like during COVID when we couldn't provide those opportunities. So this is a major engagement area for some of our students, and the motivation to provide them with higher academic standards than maybe some have even set for themselves. Also, we want to encourage wider participation. We look at the outcomes, we see that they have been positive for many students, and we'd like an opportunity to offer that to more students if possible. And then to also make sure that all of our stakeholders understand the criteria and the purpose behind them. This can be a very polarizing topic. We do understand that, but we did want to review those goals when looking at this policy. So currently, we understand, but we don't want to focus so much on the fact that it's not a student right, that it's a privilege. We really want to work to make sure that all our students have achieved the specific academic standards and also that their education is well-rounded. We have some language revisions here that we've proposed, so it doesn't change the meaning of the policy, but we do think that there's great value in the work that's added here. It doesn't focus so much on the fact of it not being a student right. It really talks about the benefits of athletics, how powerful they can be in the lives of students, how it can enhance their school experience, and also that we are supporting them with our commitment to promotion and retention. So we think this language really puts the value we have behind education-based athletics in the policy. Additionally, it might be minor, but this is something that we would like to clean up in the policy. The language can be confusing when you're looking at interscholastic and intrascholastic. So we simply want to use interscholastic grades 6 through 8 as middle school athletics. There's been some confusion with the word intramural, and we think that we can make the policy cleaner if we just stick to scholastic athletics, and where we're referencing middle school, actually use the language middle school athletics. Our current requirements. What does it take to participate in athletics currently? We require a 2-point quarterly GPA. Students are not allowed to have more than 1 grade below passing. First-time 9th graders. If you're entering into the fall season, you have like a free pass is what we'll call it. You're automatically eligible to participate. And this is something consistently that you see across the state. So it's not really unique to Baltimore City. It is usually how people allow students to transition in, because we understand that that can be a rough time. A lot of our students coming from middle school that haven't really used a GPA, so we don't require any academic criteria for that first experience to participate. Academically ineligible students also have an opportunity to have a waiver. So if they have not met at the eligibility decision point our requirements, but they have strong progress, we'll use 4 consecutive quarters, and we will see if they will be eligible to participate that way. We also have a policy that students can try to regain their eligibility if they have been unsuccessful using the academic probation period of 20 days, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. And students in the fall also have an opportunity to participate by approving by 2 summer school courses. So if they have successfully completed those classes in summer school, we'll use an academic GPA that's just for eligibility purposes. It does not appear on the transcript, but we can reinstate them in the fall season that way as well. Our decision points, and you'll also see one of the proposed recommendations here. So as it determined by the season length, we do not have any control over that area. The state tells us when we can start and when we can stop. So those definitions that you see there for season length are provided by the state. But what it means in terms for participating athletes, in order to participate in a fall sport, we do look at your 4th quarter report card to determine if you've made the mark. When the 1st quarter report card is issued, if that sport is still continuing, students have to be meeting with academic progress at that time, or they will be removed from the team. In full transparency, quite often, if you have not made it to like the highest levels of your sport, typically that report card is not issued. So most of those students do have an opportunity to finish that fall season, because as you see, it starts in August. And so the length of the season kind of concludes before that report card is usually issued. In the winter, November 15th is that day that first quarter report card will determine students that are eligible to participate. When the 2nd quarter report card, which we should be receiving later this month, is issued, we will have to review that. Students who are not meeting with academic progress at that time will have to be removed from teams. And similarly, in the spring when we start, it'll be the 2nd quarter report card that will determine if they can start the sport, and it will be the 3rd quarter that will determine if they can remain on the team. Just to clean up the language that you see here with quarters, to make it more aligned with the policy for grading, we will change this language to marking period so it is consistent in both documents. Academically eligible, two criteria that our students are educated on that they have to have in order to participate. It's that quarterly GPA or the minimum GPA. So 2.0 is the magic number that all students are told that they need to meet in order to participate, and not having more than one grade below the passing at the eligibility decision point. Our proposed revisions, we simply want to ease the administrative burden and make it a little bit more simple for our students with having one requirement. So here you will see the proposal that a quarterly GPA of 2.0 or that cumulative that we discussed of the previous 4 quarters is the requirement for grades 10 through 12 and repeat 9th graders. For our first-time 9th graders here, you do see that we want to remain with them having that automatic eligibility during the first grading period of high school, but then go to something consistent with what we've used in our middle school programming by having no more than one grade below passing. And that would be in place for the rest of the year for that 9th grade year. And so one of the things that we did here in earlier presentations that it seemed to be that fall students were favored. We have spoken to some of our stakeholders, and we will continue to review that, but we have not seen much support at the school level with athletic directors or with principals with giving a free full year. They think students will have gone too long without being held accountable and not enough support to be able to regain if they have struggled during that freshman year. So I just want to call it out that we have heard that, we have proposed it, but this is where we were able to meet. We think this will allow students to have a easier time with transition, provide more access to them, but not quite have them at the point of making sure that they're at a 2.0. We do have many students as they are transitioning. A lot of times in the 9th grade, you hear like, well, I passed all my classes, and you most certainly can pass all your classes, but still not meet with that 2.0 mark. And many of them are just kind of understanding that grade point average language and how that works in terms of calculating it. So this just kind of sums up what has already been stated. But again, I would like to reiterate that the first-time students will still remain automatically eligible. There is no change for that. So they have that exemption for the fall. And then our proposed language is that that stays in place, but they will have no more than one grade below passing at the eligibility decision point when the fall report card comes out, and that will be the same requirement for the winter and also for the spring seasons. Our rationale here is just we want to streamline the process. We think that this provides greater access to our students, and it is also consistent with what we have required in that middle school programming for district coordinated programs. Impact on student well-being. We believe that this will just really acknowledge the changes that students are going through during that 9th grade transition. We understand that it can be difficult. We also are hoping that if we can identify supports by having them on teams, that there will be caring adults who will be responsible for providing that support, assisting with the monitoring, and checking in with them, as opposed to just kind of eliminating them before they had an opportunity to participate in many of the things that we offer. We also have reached out and spoken to our On Track to Graduate team. We understand that their goal is to make sure that students are passing all courses and that they are accumulating the necessary credits to graduate. So we believe that the work is in alignment with their goals as well. As it relates to the proposed revision with course failures, as stated, students are required to have no more than one grade below passing. With this, as we are streamlining it, we just would like to use the 2.0 as the requirement to maintain eligibility for students in grades 10 through 12. Here again, we make it easier administratively, and also we understand that there is a minor impact. In most instances where students have not met with the 2.0, they typically have multiple failures. That's just commonly what we see. Only a very few percentage of students meet the GPA requirement while failing more than one class. As we're looking across benchmarks across the state, there are about 20 out of 24 that are requiring a 2.0. I'm getting some updated information, so I will update the slides as some of this has shifted slightly as others have revised their policy. Roughly about 10 out of 20 of those districts also require no more than one failure. I think we are up to roughly 7 school districts now that require a 2.0 with no other requirements. Prince George's County is also a county within that group that just has a GPA requirement without other requirements. There are a few districts that you see listed here that require require 0 failures in order to participate as it relates to eligibility. And then you see that there are some districts that don't have a GPA requirement. They do different policies, maybe no pass, no play, or they allow it just by a failure, but they don't really look at a GPA and have different various appeals processes. And we did identify that Montgomery County allows freshmen an exemption from the academic eligibility standard. We also made an effort to look at some comparative school systems. You do see quite a few school systems similar to what we are required to do by the state, make satisfactory progress towards graduation. They really focus on how many credits have been earned versus how many credits are needed to graduate. But we see here, Milwaukee also has like a transition period. They actually allow it for their 9th and 10th graders, as we've proposed it only for grade 9. But you do see that there are other districts that are understanding of that transition and have made those revisions to policies to support that. And at this time, I'd like to tag in Mr. Simon.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Simon Birnbaum. I'm the Director of Grading, Assessment, and Scheduling, and I'm very happy to be able to share some data with you about academic eligibility to give you a sense of sort of where we stand now and also what some of these proposed changes would do for eligibility moving forward. In this first chart here, you can see that academic eligibility for sports is not spread evenly across all schools. So these are the schools that that the athletic department managed their athletics for, and you can see that the eligibility across schools varied very widely. You'll also sort of notice that the reasons for eligibility, this gives you a sense of the scale. The green bar, of course, is the percentage of students who are academically eligible. The red is students who missed both requirements, both of the current requirements, both the GPA and the number of Fs. The orange bar is those who missed only the GPA requirements, and then very, very barely visible is a tiny little blue bar, which is students who failed 2 or more classes but still had a GPA. So that sort of gives you a sense of the scale visually. Next slide. On average, about 60% of students across these 20 schools met academic eligibility. And there's a really wide range from 27% all the way up to 95%. About 2/3 of ineligible students missed both the GPA and the failing class criteria, and only 1.7% of ineligible students, which is fewer than 1% of students overall, met the GPA requirement while failing more than one class. It's also very typical that students who do well at the beginning of the year continue to do well throughout the year, and students who don't do well at the beginning continue to not do well throughout the year. So we can see that 2/3 of students who were eligible after Q1 maintained that eligibility throughout the year, and 3/4 of students who were not eligible remained ineligible throughout the year. Next slide. We found that sports participation increases the students' likelihood of maintaining good grades and staying connected to schools, both after Q1 and after Q2. Even if we're only looking at students who were eligible to play, not just those who played, just looking at students who already had good grades and were meeting standards, we can see that students who were participating in athletics were more likely to continue to meet eligibility standards in the following quarter. That was true both for winter sports athletes and for spring sports athletes. Of the about 4,600 students who were first-time 9th graders last year, about 12% participated in fall sports when all first-time 9th graders were eligible. And of those who were participating in sports, 71% of them continued to meet eligibility standards after the first quarter, compared to just 57% of non-athletes. And of all the students who met eligibility standards, non-athletes were 4 times more likely than athletes to transfer schools or to drop out after Q2 or Q3. Obviously, it's not completely, we can't completely make a causation link here, but it does suggest that students, that there is some sort of relationship between making good grades and staying connected to your school and playing sports. Next slide. This slide here sort of gives you a sense of how these proposed changes would affect eligibility. The charts on the left show you information about first-time 9th graders last year after quarters 1, 2, and 3. The proposed changes would allow the students in the orange band there to maintain eligibility. Those are students who who did not have a 2.0 GPA, but were passing all or all but one of their classes. So as students are making that transition from middle school to high school and they're spending their first time ninth grader, it would give about 16% of our first time ninth graders eligibility and give them the opportunity to meet a caring adult in the building, to have someone, get them involved in the school, someone who's going to care about their academic eligibility, and somebody who's going to work with them to make sure that they're meeting that 2.0 standard moving into the following school year and beyond. The proposed standards, making it only the 2.0 requirement, does not have a very big effect at all on students who are not first-time ninth graders. That's about 1.7% of students would gain eligibility. As we saw before, that blue bar is very little, but as Director Byrd mentioned earlier, it would greatly reduce the administrative burden at schools in terms of measuring and keeping up with which students are on pace to maintain eligibility. Next slide. One very important piece of information that we found is that academic eligibility standards are not spread equally across demographics. They are more likely to exclude students who are male, students who are non-white, or multilingual learners. And one important piece is that the proposed changes for the first-time ninth graders would narrow those gaps. It would not eliminate those gaps, but it would narrow them. So for example, in the graph below, you see the first, that top line right there, the orange one, that is a graph that is a line that's measuring the gap between the eligibility of white students and African-American students. You can see that under our current policy, that gap between eligibility is 15.3 percentage points, and for first-time ninth graders in 23-24. And if we were using the new proposed changes, that gap would drop to just 8.4 point gap. So you can see that the gap in eligibility is falling for all sort of demographic pairs, whether it's female and male students, white and African American students, white and Hispanic students, or non-multilingual students and multilingual students. I'll pass it back to Director Byrd.
Thank you so much. So just to quickly review our alternative pathways to eligibility when students have not met our requirements, we do allow summer school to be a factor in fall eligibility, and students currently can take a maximum of 2 classes. The academic waiver is what we use when we are using those previous 4 quarters to determine that they have met our standard. And please note that this has only been offered to students that have no more than 1 grade below passing at the eligibility decision point. So the proposed revision would also give greater access to students to be able to use academic waivers if they have been performing successfully for those 4 consecutive quarters. And additionally, academic probation. When students have not met with the previous pathways that I've identified, they have had an opportunity to participate in a 20-day probation period. I will talk about that briefly. When students are trying out and it has been determined that they have not met the requirements, they have an academic advisor assigned to them. They are on a contract. They have to complete a certain number of support hours, and those have to be documented. They are allowed to practice with the team. However, they are not allowed to be issued a team uniform. They can't travel with the team. And at the end of those 20 academic days, their progress is evaluated. If they are at that time meeting the academic standard, they can be reinstated at that time. So we use a calculator for their GPA to put their courses in. And if they have a 2.0 and meet that full requirement, then they can be a full participant of the team at that time. Proposed revisions for summer school. For years, that maximum of 2 courses was there because that is what was allowed. We have seen that has been expanded. And so we have heard the feedback, like if we are allowed to take more, can more courses count towards eligibility? If they are willing to do the work, we are proposing that those courses be used to meet academic eligibility requirements. Proposed revisions for academic probation. This is an area that I've identified that we do need to tighten the rules. And so here we would like to just simply prevent misuse and ensure, as it is our responsibility, that student athletes are on track to graduate. And so we would like to maintain the contract with academic probation and the requirements needed to be completed. However, we do want to tighten that gap to make sure the students cannot use this pathway for eligibility for multiple seasons. In order to do that, then you will have to go through a process with the academic office, similar to what some districts do as an appeal. I think here, the key thing to remember is an opportunity to use this multiple times, whether it be multiple seasons within the same year or multiple times for the same sport, allows students to have access to athletics, but maybe they are not on track to graduate or have had multiple failures. And so we do want to make sure that we don't have a loophole in identifying opportunities to participate without having, made some satisfactory progress in those courses. Also, I spoke about it earlier, but just to reiterate here that we want to change that marking period, use the term marking period to make that consistent and remove the quarters. We also want to add some language here. We have it a little bit in our handbook, but think that this is a fitting place to talk about transfer students. We see that there is a prevalent group of kids who are transferring, but we want to make sure they understand when you come into city schools that you will be required to meet the eligibility requirements based on the grades that we receive from that sending school. So this appears to be an appropriate place to state that, and also highlight our standing rule that you cannot participate in the same sport for two different schools unless there is approval in a process. Like there will be some perhaps extenuating circumstances, change of custody, safety, but we do want to try to eliminate that transferring for athletic advantage. This whole portal situation, I think, in colleges has created its own little cycle in high schools as well. So that will be our way of stating what our policy is, and then making sure that we have, firmly made that clear to all students. So some additional definitions, eligibility period, we have that language in our policy, but want to clarify the time from the date that the report card is issued until the next report card is issued. That's the period. GPA language talking about marking period and marking period averages. So this just kind of adds to the policy and makes some things more clear for all of our stakeholders. And additionally, we partner with a number of offices as we talked about our connection to other parts of city schools work. The equity is a part of our policy, wellness, nutrition, and physical activity, and also student wholeness and supportive services. And so we definitely wanted to make sure that this was included in the policy. We are very excited about ways in which we've enhanced our programming to include the addition of 15 trainers to our high school programs this year. So we know students are greatly supported, removing barriers with our partners to provide physicals free of cost. So these are things that we wanted to just make sure are also shown in the policy that we have proposed. In this section, we understand that we have outlined and discussed what the student responsibility is and that their portion of accountability, but I'm very pleased to have received recommendations and move forward to also talk about the school's responsibility. So we do want to make sure that students are communicated with in writing about the activities and the opportunities and what it means to participate in those. Additionally, we want the participation to be encouraged, but we also feel that the school has a responsibility to provide support ongoing throughout this process and also evaluate the support programs that they have provided to students. So the students do have the responsibility, but we also have a responsibility to support participating students. And that would also be language that we would add to the policy that's not currently there. As it relates to stakeholder engagement and next steps, we had an opportunity to meet in a forum on the 16th with students and get some feedback. So we were excited about that. And we know that we will continue that work. This is a Tier 3 policy. It requires the maximum engagement. So we'll have the opportunity for public feedback. We also have planned to engage a joint meeting with our principals and athletic directors. So we definitely want feedback there. I previously mentioned to you that Student Athlete Leadership Council. So we intend to go in front of them at one of their Under Armour meetings because they meet monthly. And additionally, we recognize that there will be some opportunities for some target unsolicited feedback. We understand that it will be important to look at our data, determine schools that have used academic probation more frequently, and get in front of those groups also, because we are proposing a significant change to that program. So we do want to make sure that the voice is heard from all valuable stakeholders, and definitely that means all participating students, those who have needed those supports and those who have managed to qualify without any additional pathways. Some of the feedback, because we have been discussing this for quite some time, we've tried to be responsive to. We have heard from several people that they thought the academic probation should be more stringent. You will see that we have proposed revisions to address that. Some people felt like streamline it. We don't need 2 requirements. It's only a small percentage. Stick with the 2.0, or just use a failure requirement. I think we have addressed that here. We are definitely hoping that the revisions that we have proposed, at least for the freshmen, kind of minimizes some of the gaps in the demographics that Mr. Berenbaum was kind enough to cover. And then we have maintained multiple ways to regain eligibility. I do understand the importance, of course, of academics, but we recognize that there are some students who don't always get it right on the first try. And so we want to make sure, where possible, that we provide supports and additional opportunities for them to remain engaged in the activities that we're providing. And you see the comment referenced in summer school. We have also expanded there. So following our timeline, I am here today, of course, at Policy Committee for feedback. And first reader will be on March 11th, with second reader on April 22nd. And continuous stakeholder feedback, of course, will be occurring during that time. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present today, and I look forward to any questions or feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that, like, you all are intentionally like reaching out to students that are most impacted so that they have like direct feedback. And I have a question about the multilingual learners, like how that feedback is getting gathered too, like to make sure that, you know, because I know there's like barriers to their participation in some of the groups. So yeah, is there space or like meetings being made directly with those students? Because I saw a coach had mentioned concerns around that.
Yes, that is definitely a part of the plan with our stakeholder feedback. We have worked with athletic directors. We actually had a whole conversation, I guess, like if they were identifying any problems, but I was instructed that there is not only a student group. I have some targeted groups at certain schools that have been more than willing to assist and to discuss the experience of multi-language learners with our academic policy.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll open up to questions from other commissioners.
No specific questions, but I did just want to shout out, I really enjoyed getting to hear students' perspectives and even just listening to them share about ways that that's kind of equipping, and that some of them were advocating for higher and lower, and listening to them even just disagree within the room. I really appreciated their perspective as they prepared for college and what's next. And I think also just for your office in general, as you have a support of you, an attitude of support of how do we realizing like this is for some of our kids our greatest carrot of how do you engage in this system and how do we have that be a meaningful one, that we're even kind of going back to our previous presentation of like, how are we creating environments of where we have safe adults and ensuring that students are connected with schools? Because for a lot of our students, the reality is that this is kind of one of the key networks. So I appreciated that leverage and just how thoughtful you have been about finding where do you thread that needle to make sure that there is accountability, but also support. I guess the one little question, and if you don't have an answer, this is just my own data brain kind of going down this rabbit hole. For those thin strips of blue, I guess wondering if there's like a narrative for those students, you know, like are those typically students that kind of just have, you know, like they don't like the teacher, they really, really struggle with algebra, and that's just going to be a given. You're like, and they're not a math kid. Is there a narrative kind of before that? Because from a data perspective, it makes sense in terms of administration. Yeah. But I was wondering if there was a story we were missing in that number.
We don't have that detailed. We haven't done that level of detail, but we do think that it is due mostly to students who are participating in advanced academic opportunities, and so they are able to have their GPA boosted by their passing grades in some of the other courses, even though they have a couple zeros for the GPA bringing it down. So students who are participating in AP or IB classes are definitely more likely to fall into this category of people who have a 2.0 GPA, just because the classes that they are passing have that boost to the advanced. So it helps them maintain that high GPA even though they have 2 failing classes.
Commissioner Willinger, got a question?
It's actually not a question, it's just a comment, and I was late, so I didn't hear you talk about this, but I did get a chance to review the slides in advance, and I just wanted to say I really appreciated seeing the thought and intention put towards broadening access to ninth graders and eligibility for ninth graders. I remember when you brought this the first time, we had a conversation specifically about that, and you were mentioning how other jurisdictions handle that. And so it's not a question, just an appreciation that you put a lot of thought into that specific piece, and that more ninth graders will have access throughout the entire season, not just for the fall season, with the rationale being that, you want to get to experience these things and they can serve as a motivator, one of the rationales for that. So just appreciate that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you all so much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. And next we had 2 compliance reports, JFB student enrollment and JFC intra-district student transfer. Did we have any questions or feedback about those?
I did. So I really appreciate that the district compiles this information in terms of our demographics on an annual basis, and it's helpful from an enrollment standpoint. I'm curious, as the Office of Enrollment Choice and Transfer continues to look at this information, how we're having conversations across the district to really understand how we're allocating resources to really serve our populations as they shift. So that, as we see greater increases in numbers of students of Hispanic origin, decreases of African American students, what are we learning and how are we influencing different types of resources?
Sure. So, well, first of all, good afternoon, commissioners and all assembled. Right now, we have 6 enrollment offices that oversee kind of enrollment placement here at district office. And one of the things that we're doing to address that particular topic is that we are actually meeting. We have actual work groups that are coming together specifically to look at the trends holistically, but also to think about how they are impacting our various offices. One of the things, we work very closely with the Multilingual Enrollment and Support Center, which is primarily charged with supporting our students, our multilingual families that are doing enrollment. So we work very closely to understand some of the nuances that are affecting what they are seeing, and specifically around the resources that that department and academics are actually pushing out to support those students, even as it relates to kind of assessment and those other elements that are unique supports for that student population. So we are definitely comparing trends and looking at it kind of the year over year stats and things for that different populations that are represented within the enrollment data.
Got it. Thank you, Mr. Tillman. I think that is a global kind of question I had. I think there's a lot to learn, getting really specific into this data in terms of what we're doing on the budget front and other fronts across academically here. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Redding-Rollinger.
Thank you, and thanks for these compliance reports. I found the entry code data to be really very interesting, and found myself wanting more detailed information about the exits that students are making. I know this is very hard, having worked in schools and districts for a while. Sometimes you transfer to a new district and we just don't ever hear from you again. We don't know why. But in some cases, we can get some information about why folks are leaving us. And I know on the other compliance report, I saw the codes for withdrawal. I assumed those were mostly withdrawal from city schools and potentially not transferring into other systems, because I was looking at the codes, but maybe I'm incorrect. So I was hoping you could help me understand what I'm looking at with the withdrawal data and what that's telling us. And if you have any thoughts or suggestions for how we might be able to, again, granted, this is a very difficult thing to do. Sometimes people just leave and they just leave and they don't tell you anything. But I do think it would help us understand if we have families moving to the county at a certain juncture, for instance, why are they saying that they're moving to the county? Or if, there's a transition from elementary to middle. I noticed the data in, we have an increase in elementary students from last year to this year and a decrease in middle and high. So just wondering if, again, help me contextualize the withdrawal data, number one. And then number two, is there anything we could do to get a better handle or an idea for those students who are specifically leaving our district and not enrolling in another district school, what their stated reason for leaving is?
So I thank you for that question. What I will say specifically is a couple of things. One, there is a report that is going to come to you very shortly that is policy JFD, which kind of looks at the withdrawal information in a lot of different ways. So I believe that team will come forward and kind of have a bigger presentation to you specifically on just withdrawals from city schools and kind of the efforts that are being made as it relates to by code. What I will say for the data that is presented, what we can see is specifically we look at 3 bit codes that kind of are reflected in our data as our area points, area of focus, and I'm going to say W33s, which are our lack of interest students, our W41s, which are our students that are leaving us kind of at the pre-K level due to what is coded immaturity under MSDE guidelines, and then also our W50 students. And one thing that we will see in our W50 when the state kind of changed some of the definition pieces, those are our students that are not assessing educational services over a period of time. So we see that those were 2,228 students for that particular year. What I will say, when we look at kind of the year-over-year trend, we will see that that is down. So we are doing different work groups have been formed for each one of these codes that were driving our numbers for that particular year. And I will say again, the previous year we were closer to 2,500. It's reduced, but it's still very high for the W50 codes. For our immaturity code, those are our students that are going through pre-K, and the families, for whatever reasons, have opted to kind of hold and to maybe try again for the next year when kindergarten becomes a mandatory compulsory age for enrollment. So we see that, and then kind of again our re-engagement center. The whole purpose of our re-engagement center is to really kind of support our W33 cases and to really kind of look at re-engaging. So even though these students have decided to withdraw, in a way that is kind of a flag for that particular department and the staff there to kind of go in and re-engage through the various partnerships that they have as it relates to kind of re-engaging those students and seeing what barriers that they have. So when we think of some of our AOP programs, our Youth Opportunity, our Career Academy, those are kind of the programs that we're looking at for our W33. So when we think about our withdrawal codes, we're getting better. We have work groups that are formed for those that are driving, but there's absolutely work to do. So we are working specifically with the Office of Achievement and Accountability to really get better in our exit interviews, because that kind of drives the information as to why students are leaving and where they are going. And that is one of the things that right now is kind of done at a school level. So it's by school in terms of, kind of the resources and staffing that are available to figure out exactly why the student is going in to kind of conduct what is called that exit interview process. So we have we're looking at kind of ways in which we can kind of digitize that information, one, because right now it is actually the information is being done, but the interviews are on paper and stored in the CUNY folders. So to kind of, bring all that information together and kind of look at the trends and kind of, analyze it and then be able to report out to you and others as to, kind of the lessons learned. There's some work that we have to do to kind of digitize that process. So we are working with different stakeholders to see exactly see how we can do that for the coming year. And that is something that the CEO has asked us to really be able to dig into so that we can know where students are going, what grade levels they're leaving, and just have a better understanding of kind of the enrollment trends for that particular purpose.
Just two quick follow-ups on that. So I appreciate that answer. That is helpful to understand how you all are thinking about it. I mean, one thing I would say is to me, this is really urgent. Like, we need to understand why kids are leaving our system. And so if there are things that you need from the board or things that we can do to help facilitate that process, I think this is one of the most important pieces of data we could have. The second thing that I would say is, and maybe this is in the more detailed report that's coming, but I guess this is more of an ask, which is even just knowing, if I'm looking here at the transfer codes and the withdrawal activity, even overlaying those so that I can know how many of a given withdrawal code are students who have transferred to another school in city schools versus how many within a particular withdrawal code have transferred to another public school in Maryland, to another public school outside of Maryland, who are going to a non-public school. So is that the level of detail that we'll get in this next report? Is that an example of something we'd get in this next report?
It will be included in the next report, but for the T10, if you're looking at JFC does describe, in terms of the transfer activity, the number of students that transferred within Baltimore City for that given year, also the number of students that transferred kind of to another public school in Maryland, also looking at those that transfer outside of Maryland, and then just kind of the non-public and homeschool. So that information isn't this, but we can dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, what I'm saying is, if you look at W33, let's just use an example. We have 803 withdrawals due to lack of interest. I'm trying to figure out how many of those 803 were a T10 transfer versus a T13 versus T14 versus T15. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. So we may have to let me confer with my kind of data people to actually see about kind of the inputs of those particular students so that we can show it in that particular way. But I believe that may be coming in the secondary report.
Okay, just because I think that makes such a big, like, without that context, you know, if all the kids who are lacking interest are actually just going to another school within city schools, that's one thing. If the majority of them are leaving the district, that's a whole nother thing. So even just that level of context.
What I can say is for W33, that's going to be coded. Those students are leaving the district. So for all of our W codes, the W codes are not considered transfer codes. The W codes are exit codes. So for all of our W33, those are the students that have left the district, and based upon the exit interview, that is the coding that was given to them. So for those
that's very helpful.
Yeah,
thank you.
For
That's
those
very
that
helpful.
you're thinking of, that would have been included in the T10 data.
Yeah, yes. I was thinking, because I was trying to add these numbers up. So those are all non-T10. I still think it would be helpful for the record to know, you know, be able to differentiate, are they going to a non-public school? Are they going to another district? But still, that at least gives me some context. I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem.
Assurance Messenger.
Thanks. Kind of building on that, questions of, I really appreciate thinking about the reasons why with all of those. I think also curious about what that looks like from a grade level view, and specifically looking at that 8th and 9th grade of just like close to like a 10% like loss. Like, I mean, like 8, like that's a significant loss. And like looking at kind of, there's a general kind of idea of what that is. And then also looking at kind of, this is kind of a thought ahead and collectively to Stefan's reason of like thinking about ways the board and other offices can be involved in terms of having, is that tied to like school choice? Is that in preparation for school choice? Like, do we have an idea of where those numbers are coming from, or is there a report coming up?
Sure.
And then I also had an early childhood question too there.
Sure. So some of this reflects kind of the year-over-year trend. So the previous year, we saw kind of the same level of decrease. So when we think about the rollover to that, we still are seeing that particular decrease for that particular school year. We do know that there are some other elements that anecdotally that we can apply. So we start to think about some elements of school choice and things of that nature. Some of that is the work that we're doing and actually doing kind of the exit interviews and being able to really glean in as to what is actually occurring. So we can come back and kind of report that piece, because we are doing some additional research on that particular grade band to actually see exactly what happened. But we do know that year over year, we have experienced kind of a slight decrease from our secondary grade levels from 6 to 12, whereas we are seeing a huge, not huge, but we're seeing more of an increase of stabilizing the numbers for our pre-K to 5.
Yeah, that would be super, especially with just that 8th and 9th grade, which is like an interesting span developmentally to see that over year. And then I guess similarly looking at that pre-K through first band, like how much of that like is there a longitudinal trend there? And then looking at how much of that is just, we saw really rapid preschool and expansion over the last couple of years. How much of that is just redistributing those numbers earlier to pre-K and therefore having a relative loss later? What is the other thing? And then also how does that fit into funding long term as we all go into budget season in terms of what are we anticipating? What are the tools that are coming down the pipe to help us?
Sure. So we know with our pre-K, certainly that was when we think about the pandemic, we know that it took us a while to kind of have a recovery period. Certainly the district has invested resources into really heavily promoting pre-K, not only at the district level, but also encouraging our school and school leaders to kind of promote from their seats, to do open houses, to do different things to get our pre-K students in, because we know that when we can get our pre-K students in the door, they're set. So we've done a lot of work in really shifting not only the focus that we've traditionally had on our middle and high school choice process, but also kind of on that pre-K process. We know Kerwin also drives a little bit of that as we have moved now towards kind of a centralized enrollment period. So we're actually seeing continued gains in this particular piece, and we're going to hope that will sustain and continue. But that's kind of, I think, some of the work that we have really done in collaboration between our Office of Early Learning, our Office of Enrollment, our Office of Schools to really come together and to kind of push on our pre-K levers and partners and all of those things to make sure that we could have a robust program for our students. But that work continues. We're actually in the midst of planning now for this upcoming year.
Awesome. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you for answering all of our questions. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
And that is the end of our agenda. Our next meeting date is February 18th at 4 o'clock. Sorry, we went a different time today. That will be a virtual meeting, and we'll look at policy JKA, behavioral interventions and student discipline. Let's see. And yes, to sign up for public comment, if you would like to speak at the next meeting or give feedback, you can do so by signing up at 9 a.m. Thursday before the meeting. Oh, wait, 1 second. We actually changed our policy. Let me pull this out quick. Oh, so we're actually going to start sign up at 3:30 p.m. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're going to start doing public comment on the day of. So just like our board meetings, you can sign up starting at 9 a.m. on the day of the meeting up until the beginning of the meeting at 3:30. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. And so we'll have spots for 5 individuals to provide public comment to the policy committee. Each speaker will get 3 minutes, and all of the public comments should address the policies that we're discussing in that meeting. And everyone's okay to adjourn, or do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Eames Messenger.
Yay, thank you. Thank you all so much. And I'll see you at the next meeting.
See you soon.
Thank you very
Bye.
much, Esposito.
Bye, y'all.
Have a great day.